Hey guys, and welcome back to GP Fans on YouTube. My name is Luther, as always. I'm your host, and we're at the Temple of Speed this weekend, won by Max Verstappen, his third victory of the season. It's been a while since we heard the Dutch national anthem followed by the Austrian national anthem, but it feels like something that we've become used to in Formula One. So having the British and the Australian national anthem followed by the British national anthem is something that I'm still getting adjusted to, with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris dominating. But Max Verstappen was on top with the largest margin of victory of the season. Me and Nicholas talked last episode. He's just absolutely spectacular. We gave our most memorable moments of the season. Both of us had Max Verstappen moments. You know, his pole position in Silverstone, his pole position in Japan. Well, I think he's just eclipsed both of them with that win at Monza and pole position at Monza. Fastest lap in F1 history and fastest race in F1 history. I think it's fair to put Max Verstappen in the conversation of fastest drivers in F1 history after that weekend. If you didn't have him there already, I kind of already did. But despite Max Verstappen's dominance, the talking point was McLaren, because once again, Andrea Stella, Zach Brown, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and the rest of the crew, well, they just proved that they are the most boring team to be dominant in F1 in a very long time. Because if you didn't see the race, we saw the latest display of papaya rules on lap 49 when Oscar Piastri slowed down to allow Lando Norris, his closest title competitor, through due to Norris having a slow pit stop. Sat in second, Norris offered Piastri the opportunity to pit first, protecting him from a Leclerc undercut, of which he was realistically no threat to. If you watched the race, you saw the mediums were not going away from anyone. So Leclerc, who had been pitted like 10-ish laps before, Oscar Piastri was still about 4 seconds behind Piastri when he pitted. So there was no real threat there. Also, very strange for Lando Norris to protect his nearest title rival. I get their teammates, but that's still the person that you're battling to fulfill your lifelong dreams with. But nevertheless, Lando Norris pitted the following lap and had a slow pit stop. Was about 4 seconds slower than Oscar Piastri, who tied the fastest pit stop of the season due to a failure on the front left. And the front left guy did not realize he hadn't put the tire in properly. He actually had to get tapped by another engineer to realize that he hadn't done it. But when he left the pit straight, Lando Norris was behind Oscar Piastri, and Oscar Piastri was almost instantaneously told by the McLaren team to let his teammate through, of which he replied, "I thought we said a slow stop is part of racing." He didn't lie there. "But if you really want me to do it, I'll do it." He obliged and followed Lando to finish third, a distant third, and a distant second to Max Verstappen, completing a McLaren 2-3. Charles Leclerc came in fourth, about 3 seconds behind Oscar Piastri, which I think Ferrari should take. 3 seconds behind the McLaren is absolutely fantastic. I know it's Monza, so it's a bit different, but I'll take 3 seconds. And that's the only bit I'm going to talk about Ferrari, because we need to talk about McLaren. As I said, this was the latest chapter of embarrassing micromanagement by McLaren, and what many fans have described as a lack of dog from their drivers. You hear that often, and multiple times I've come in here and said maybe the further we get into the season, we're going to see their drivers kind of get a bit chirpy with each other. We thought Canada was going to be the first time, and I thought Canada was going to be something that would happen more often, when Lando Norris accidentally smashed into the back of his teammate. But since then, there's been no ag. There's been nothing. And once again, in Monza, there was nothing. Oscar Piastri did something that I don't think any previous champion would have done. Allow their nearest competitor to overtake them because of something that was out of their control, something that was deemed unfair by his teammate. And I'm going to talk to you guys about some examples of people definitely that wouldn't do that and people that didn't do that in the past later on. But following the race, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff stated that McLaren have set a dangerous precedent for the rest of the season with how they managed that situation. And I completely agree, because the thing is with what McLaren have done is now Oscar Piastri has complete leverage and complete power over any situation he feels the team may be able to see as unfair. You look back at China, when Yuki Tsunoda was running in a good position, they went for a gamble with the strategy, and he was working his way back into the points when he was still at Racing Bulls. His front wing failed, under load, completely by itself. The sheer force of the wind broke his front wing. Let's say, for example, the two McLarens are far ahead of everybody as they have been. We've seen that in Austria and other places, Australia before the rain came down and before the red flag, etc. I could name you multiple times. Let's say they're in a situation like that. Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris is leading the race. And their front wing absolutely destroys itself. Nothing happens. They don't crash, or even like an Alonso suspension failure, like we saw in Monza, something completely out of the driver's control. Is the other driver now expected to allow their teammate through because of that thing out of their control happening? Because that's the precedent they've set. Lando Norris pitted. The guy that was attaching his front left wheel made a mistake. Lando Norris lost 4 seconds to his teammate. His teammate overtook him. And his teammate was then expected to give the place back. Not just his teammate, his championship rival. If Lando Norris goes on to win the championship by 3 points, Oscar Piastri can go back to Monza and be like, you guys lost me the championship. That was out of my control. Or should Piastri be expected to retire 1 point in the season? Because Lando Norris's engine blew 2 races ago. That was out of Lando Norris's control. Would you say that's fair? Oscar Piastri hasn't had a DNF in years. In over a season, in over 2 seasons, he's not had a DNF. So should he be expected to DNF because the person that manufactured Lando Norris's car, because it was a McLaren issue, it wasn't a Mercedes engine issue. The engine failure was on the McLaren side. Should Oscar Piastri not run a race because Lando Norris has an engine failure, which is out of his control? Or let's use an actual example of something that happened to McLaren this season to Oscar Piastri, in which he didn't get the treatment that Norris got. Silverstone. Oscar Piastri's leading the race. There's a late call for the safety car to come in, so Oscar Piastri has to slam on the brakes. Max Verstappen has to dodge him last minute, and Oscar Piastri is handed a 10-second penalty. He takes the 10-second penalty and goes on to win the race. Before Lando Norris won the race, Oscar Piastri, who was running in second, said, you guys have said you do not agree with the penalty. If you do not agree with the penalty, surely I should be allowed back in front of Lando. McLaren admitted they do not agree with the penalty, but said they will not be telling Lando Norris to give up the place. So what's the difference here? That was out of Oscar Piastri's control. He didn't pick when the safety car came in. He had to slam on the brakes, otherwise he would have got a penalty for speeding. Just interesting when you think about that. So with Norris falling behind his teammate, 31 points behind, what would be the 3rd largest comeback in F1 history? People are asking, was this another show of preferential treatment towards Norris by McLaren? We all saw Zak Brown after Zandvoort, how upset he was, whilst Oscar Piastri was celebrating a win because of Lando Norris's DNF. We saw Andrea Sella smiling as Lando Norris got out of his car. There's a bit of division between who loves who. You know, there's a bit of a power struggle between the CEO and the team principal. We know who's the more powerful one, of course, the CEO, Zak Brown. But I feel it's not just the drivers that will end up being split up. It's the team. Because as much as you can try and cultivate this harmony, you've got 2 people trying to realize their lifelong goals. And there's no way you can completely keep harmony in a team when half of them work for Oscar Piastri's or on Oscar Piastri's car and half of them work on Lando Norris's car. What McLaren are trying to keep is impossible. With regard to the drivers, and specifically Piastri, I completely do not understand what he was doing. If you didn't watch the race, Max Verstappen was told that the McLaren drivers were swapping places, to which he laughed. And I think he was everybody watching that race and everyone's reaction to McLaren's call. I think Max Verstappen brilliantly just emphasized what we were all feeling. And you understand why. I remember Brazil 2022. Max Verstappen's already wrapped up his championship. He's come back from the largest points gap in history, 46 points behind Charles Leclerc. He's won the championship. Absolutely fantastic season by the Dutchman. And he was running in 6th. George Russell wins the race. Red Bull tell him, let Perez through for 6th place. because he's battling Leclerc for second in this championship. Max Verstappen said, "Don't ever tell me to do that again. I've told you why I'll never do that. We will have a talk about this later. Never tell me to do that again." I've seen some people say Lewis would have done it before. Sometimes on the internet, you can tell how long someone's been watching Formula One. We saw Lewis Hamilton refuse to allow his teammate Nico Rosberg through at the Hungaroring in 2014, despite the two literally being on different strategies. Bono was telling Lewis, move for Rosberg, move for Rosberg, move for Nico. You're on a different strategy. Nico was told, Lewis will move for you. Lewis said, if he wants to overtake me, tell him to get closer to me. Lewis was just holding him up. You know why? Because they were battling for the championship. Fernando Alonso, when he drove for McLaren, literally blocked Lewis Hamilton in the pit lane to stop him from completing a lap in qualifying while they were teammates. Do I need to talk about Senna and Prost, who drove for McLaren, crashing, deciding the title, giving Prost the title, Senna getting disqualified from the race? And what about Multi 21? Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, Malaysia 2013. Two teammates. Vettel was on a different stratosphere to Webber at that point. But he wasn't letting his teammate have the upper hand. I just don't understand how Oscar Piastri, someone who I think is so talented as a driver, can sit there and be like, you know what, yeah, I'm going to do it. Because realistically, what's the worst thing that could happen? Oscar is so talented. And I think after this season, it is clear he is who McLaren should prioritize looking forward over Lando Norris. He's a lot more consistent than Norris. He's quicker than Norris. Now he's winning the qualifying head-to-head. He's winning the race head-to-head, and he's ahead in the championship. So Oscar's got to understand that if he wants to win a championship, because it's not always going to be his teammate he's battling, he needs to adapt to that ruthlessness ASAP. I completely expected him to reject McLaren's proposition and would have been fine with it if he did. If I was him, I wish. If I was him, I would have 100% rejected it. As soon as I heard the team radio, I said, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm doing that. There's this intense wish for McLaren, the drivers, and the team to keep this harmony. Oscar Piastri said one thing in the car. He said, we spoke about this. Why should I do it? But said, if you want me to, I'll do it. After he got out of the car, he said, I said everything I wanted to say in that car. And then he got to the press conference and completely flipped what he was saying. He said he agrees with it, etc., etc. Lando Norris did not say a word to his team after the pit stop. Did not go to the team after the race. Did not speak to them because he was so annoyed. McLaren have this dominant car, yet constantly they're shining a negative light on themselves. Once again, I have to say, your drivers are driving to live their childhood dream. Harmony will be broken, and it's fine. It's fine. Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, in the quest of their childhood dreams, best friends growing up, karting teammates. They used to go to each other's houses growing up. Lewis used to be invited to Monaco, because obviously Nico Rosberg's dad was a Formula One world champion, very rich family. They used to bring each other around each other's house, go all around the world, karting with each other. As soon as they became teammates and they were battling for championships together, they became enemies. And unfortunately, their friendship is still shattered to this day because of it. But in the quest of what they've been working towards their life for constantly, they were willing to sacrifice whatever it took. I think McLaren have this issue where they've had a history of two number one drivers, Senna Prost, Alonso Hamilton, Button Hamilton, Alonso Button, Sainz Norris. Sainz had the upper hand on Norris at that point, but Norris was very young. And they've gone again with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. And I think they're handling it wrong. I think they're delaying the inevitable. And I feel like what's going to happen is they're going to have a massive shock when the inevitable happens. But simply put, By micromanaging how their drivers race, when they can race, and what is deemed as fair racing, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if that thing exists, to be honest with you. McLaren have managed to micromanage and manufacture the most excruciatingly boring title battle I've seen in my lifetime. And if you can think of one that's more boring, and if you can think of one, and I mean a legit title battle, I'm not talking about the Vettel Hamilton days where Ferrari would have a good car for a couple of races, but Hamilton would absolutely walk away with the championship. I'm talking about a battle where both drivers had a realistic title chance. And honestly, this title battle and this season of McLaren dominance has led me to literally be begging for the other teams to get their act together and give these guys a good battle next season. Because whilst it's been fun seeing the Charles Leclerc Hungary pole lap or Max Verstappen's pole laps that he's put on, Japan, Silverstone, I mean, he's done 5. He's got more pole laps than Norris, the same as Oscar Piastri, in a car that his teammates got 10 points on. Seeing some Verstappen brilliance, some George Russell brilliance, some Leclerc brilliance every now and then hasn't been enough, because we've been left with the most manufactured, the most pit wall dependent drivers' championship battle in a long time. See you next week.